Hi, how you going? It's good to see you. I'm glad you could join me, and I look forward to just spending a bit of time with you today and just talking about one of the topics that I'm sort of interested in, and something that I've talked to a little bit with my wife recently, because it is sort of something that is sort of on our minds as well. And it does sort of have a huge impact on my mental health and hers as well in sort of some shape or form. I talked about a previous video around busyness. And just how busy life is. There's always something new to fit into the time that we've got, but it's very rarely that we actually have the time to do the things that we want to do. And what I want to sort of talk about today is really this idea of this to-do list, and possibly rejigging that and rethinking about how people sort of look at that. The to-do list is something that we all have. We all have those little lists around the house. We mightn't sort of think about them or write them down, but we certainly have them mentally. We might have them on a whiteboard. We might have them in a book. We might have them in a diary. We might have them wherever. A notebook from work or something like that, which just has the little things in it that we need to sort of realize what we need to do for the day, the year, the month, the week, whatever it happens to be, whatever time frame you're interested in. And these to-do lists can sometimes, there's only so many hours in the day, really. And what we're trying to do is fit beyond what can actually be done in that particular point in time. And we're putting so much time and effort into those things, but we never sort of feel any satisfaction around that very much at all. Because, at the end of the day, or at the end of the time period that you're looking at that to-do list, a lot of times you haven't crossed off that much, or you might have added 3 or 4 things and you might have only crossed off 3 or 4 things as well. So the to-do list hasn't really gotten any shorter. So if anything, you're feeling more stressed about it than you were previously, because it is, maybe some of the things that you crossed off were simple things that you might have enjoyed or had got some sort of enjoyment out of. And then the things that are still on there are the critical ones, the difficult ones, the things that actually cause you some sort of stress, cause you some sort of concerns. And so your emotions are still fairly heightened and stuff like that. You're still very much trying to deal with the emotions of not completing. You don't feel like you've done the things that you should have done. You don't feel like you're achieving the things that you should have achieved. And then, that just ends up being in this spiral of where you're constantly going downhill for how you're thinking about yourself and your self-worth and your self-being. And that's where that self-talk comes then into it as well. So for some of us, we don't even just have one to-do list. We might have multiple to-do lists. Like might have one for our personal life, one for our work life, and then maybe even sort of one thing for household things that we want to do during a course of a month. So we might have multiple lists that we're dealing with at this point in time. And if we're constantly only crossing off 1 or 2 of these long lists, that's going to build up pressure. That's going to build up feeling resentments. That's going to be build up feeling lots of negative emotions. And what we're going to try and do is actually change that around a little bit. Instead of having these lists that are never ending. There's a book, and I can't remember which book I read it out of or where I might have heard this, but there's something where I sort of read something where instead of having a to-do list, it was really looking at this in a slightly different way. It was looking at it and sort of saying, okay, I've got a day, I've got 8 hours, 10 hours, whatever you want, depending on what it is, whether it's a work day or whether it's a weekend or whether it's an evening or an afternoon. But instead of sort of saying, okay, what have I got to do, is actually turning that around and sort of saying, okay, what would make today great? If I achieved something and that would make me feel really good, what would that be? And if we can think about it in that sort of sense, suddenly that to-do list maybe not be that daunting again. If we can actually tick off one thing from that list that would then make us feel really, really good about ourselves, or really feel like we've accomplished something, or really feel like we've got started into something, really got our teeth into something. If there was something really important there that we could get done, what would it be? And that is really then sort of flipping that on the head. It's not sort of saying that none of the other things are important, but sometimes it's about reflecting on that list or reflecting on the things that you've got at hand and what would make it feel great today. And sometimes it may not be something on that list because it's something you've neglected. So you may have a list of all these chores and stuff like that, but making today great for part of it might be instead going having a coffee with a friend, doing some exercise or yoga or something like that, playing a game with the kids. That one might make today great. And that might then mean that some of the other things that you do that day just go a little bit easier, go a little bit faster. And at the end of the day, you mightn't be thinking, oh shit, I got nothing done on that day. Well, instead, you might have got that one thing that made you feel really good about yourself, or maybe somebody else felt really good about themselves, and that might be really, really good. Because there's always going to be chores. We know we're busy. Talked about that quite a few times, that we're always busy. But if we can have one thing that can actually make each day enjoyable, in whatever shape or form that takes, then that might be the one thing that we should try and put at the top of the list. And this doesn't mean that the other things aren't as important, but we've also got to make sure that we are getting some enjoyment out of life. Otherwise, if we're not hitting our to-do lists and stuff like that, we're then putting it on the next day. The next day will already have new things that we need to do as well, and so on and so forth. So instead of just constantly piling up and then sort of feeling like we're just chasing our tails, and then that whole idea of busyness really steps in, instead we could be doing some work that is giving us some sort of sense of fulfillment, some sort of sense of joy, some sort of sense of achievement. And that can go a long way then to making some of the other things that we do a lot easier. And that's really what we're trying to do here. Because if you go through the whole day and, say I take something like the cleaning, and sometimes you've got to do those things. It just got to be done, to ticked off. But if at the end of that you sort of say, all right, if I do the cleaning, or even before I do the cleaning, depending on which way you want to think about this, if I'm going to have a sit down and just read a book, have a coffee, whatever it happens to be, just enjoy a little bit of me time, and then I'll get into the cleaning at that point in time. Sometimes that can just make that other chore a little bit easier to swallow. Won't feel so hard to get through because you haven't given yourself anything at the end. And this is a little bit around that, that reward sort of feeling. It's not about making it a reward. I mean, in that sort of sense, that that coffee to the cleaning might have been sort of sense, especially if you did it after you did a reward, but you could do it at the beginning as well, so that you're doing it in such a way that, okay, I'm just going to have some downtime for myself, get myself in a good frame of mind, feel like, okay, I've had a little bit of time to myself today. Now that I've done that, I can run around like a bit of an idiot and get the things done. So sometimes it's not so much having a long list and making sure that everything gets signed off on it. It's maybe looking at what you're doing and sort of saying, okay, what can I put forward that will just make things a little bit easier for myself, and that I can actually get some enjoyment out of this. And what part do I want to? And this is sometimes where you got to sort of think about what are your end values, what are your goals, where do you want to achieve, and what do you want to do as well. And so therefore, these things that'll make that today great again will then help you to make sure that you do have great days more often than not. And that's what you're trying to do. You are really trying to make sure that most of the days that you have are not filled with drudgery. There's always going to be stuff that we need to do, and know that in just about every day that you are, there's always things that need to happen. But what can we make sure that there is something in that day so that you're actually enjoying your life, your time with your family, whatever it happens to be, and then just enjoying that time and making sure you're spending some time in that sort of sense as well. So I think this idea of this to-do list is great. It is good to get it out of your head so that it's not spinning around in there all the time. but also put on things that will actually make the day seem like it's enjoyable, something that is worthwhile looking at and worthwhile doing. So you can sort of feel like, yeah, actually today, I got some stuff done that I wanted to, but I also did this, which I really enjoyed. So make sure that those things are sort of happening as well, because they're important to do at the same time. It's not all about. That's why there's all those sort of expressions, all work and no play makes such and such a dull boy, or whatever it happened to be. I can't even remember the saying. That's so bad these days. My memory's gone. But yeah, all of those sort of sayings come from that time, and they do have, all of them have that grain of truth to them. If you're just doing work all the time, at the end you sort of feel, what the hell was this for? But if you put something in there that actually gives you a sense of fulfillment, a sense of joy, a sense of achievement, that'll make some of those other things go a lot quicker, and it'll be a lot easier for you to get through them. So think about that the next time you're doing a to-do list or any of those sort of lists, or you got a list in your head that all the things you've got to go through. Sort of think, all right, well, if I do all these, will it make me feel good? If it does, great. Get into it, get it done. Make sure you get that one thing that actually does make you feel good. If not, insert something into that day that'll actually make you feel good. And don't then sort of feel guilty for doing that as well, because that's not the point of the exercise. Guilt is not sort of what you're trying to substitute here for your other things that you're doing. So just make sure that you're looking after that mental health, and this is one way to do that. Actually, making sure that every day has something positive, something fulfilling, something worthwhile in it. All right. Hopefully, this has been of use. This was a decent video. I know it's a little bit of a ramble today, but it's just something that we were speaking about with my wife, and just something that I thought was an interesting sort of topic to share. It was probably better as a conversation than it was as a just a general, what's his name? Just dialogue, diorama, whatever it's called. But hopefully that was useful, and hopefully you get some sort of sense out of that today as well. Anyway, I'll talk to you again soon.